Welcome to part 2 of our video tutorial series building a blog application using NestJs in Angular. In this part we will set up a NestJs application. We will also create a controller, a model, and provide data for our client application. Alright, now let's start and build the NestJs application. In order to do this, we will have to install NestJs. This can be done very easy by using the NestJs CLI. You can install it from the official website. Just go to the documentation and see installation. I have already installed the CLI, and you can easily create new projects just by typing nest new project name. And the project is already created on my machine. We'll go to the project structure and see how it looks like. It is almost similar to Angular. It has a main file where you bootstrap the application and you provide the port on which it will listen. Currently it says it's set to 3000 by default. I will leave it as it is. Now we can inspect the app module. As you can see here, oops, this is a old import, just delete it. Don't have the PostController now. Alright, as you can see, the module itself and the declaration of the module looks very similar to Angular. Because of the similarities, I call NestJs Angular Backend Framework. Alright, let's go and create our post module. As you can remember, in our previous tutorial, we have created the Angular application with post list and post module. And we also created a post resource and post service. Now let's reflect this on our backend side. We'll create a new block folder. Oh, I'm sorry. Block. We will create a new module, block module, and we declare it like this. And let's just copy paste the syntaxes here and rename the class. Good. Now we will have our own controller here, so we will remove the app controller. We also want to clean up the actual application, and we don't need the app controller because we will have our controller stored in our module. We also don't need the app service. We will remove it. We will remove it from providers, and we will remove the files because we don't require them anymore. Good. Now this looks much more better. We will create our controller, block controller. And now we can create some models. Let us look at our example in Angular application, how the models should look like. This is our mock data, so we can see that the model has a title, has a subtitle, a image URL, and a content. We will reflect this in our application as well. So we will create a post model, and we will declare a new class, post model. And here we will describe the fields that will be in this model. For now, we will just describe the model fields. As we already saw, it will have a title, which will be of type string. It will have a subtitle, which will also be of type string. Oops. It will have a image URL, and it will have the content, which is also type string. For now, this is all what we need. We just described the fields that the model will have. Now let's create a different folder called services, and we will create a new service. We call it PostService. By the way, while we are working with posts, I would like to rename the block controller to PostController because it controls the behavior of data received and returned for the post model. Good, now let's go back to PostService. Let's create a new class, PostService. And we need a decorator here. I'm sorry. We need a decorator that will tell NestJs that this is a service. Actually, injectable. Same thing as in Angular. Now the service will have a method, public method. I'm sorry. Public method. Let's take a look what we need. We need a list of all posts. So we will create a method public define all. This will return an array of post models. Good. Now, while we don't have for now a database, we will create a mock data here as well. Let's just create a new folder and let's make a TypeScript file mocked posts. We will have a const called mocked posts, and we can now provide a type post model array. This will make sure that we don't miss any required fields. All right, while we use TypeScript on backend and on the frontend part, you can easily copy paste or even move the post list data to our backend application. Very nice. Now let's go back to PostService and we will say, oh, by the way, we can work and in future parts when we will add database, we'll work with asynchronous data. So let's make this post model, let's wrap it into a observable. And yes, we can use observables inside NestJs the same way as in Angular applications. And now we can return, we'll take off method from RxJS and we will wrap the mocked posts data inside a observable. Very nice. You can use, by the way, you can use observables or you can use promises. NestJs supports promises as well as observables, but I'm used to work with observables in Angular, so I prefer to use observables. Great, we have created this method that will return us our post model. Very nice. Now we can go to PostController and we will create a new class, PostController, and we also decorate this class with a controller decorator. And now let's take a look on the official website how the controller should be decorated. So we can see that routing is generated based on the decoration of the controller. So whenever we create a controller, we can bypass a parameter, a string, that will be used for the routing. I will show you in short what I mean. Now let's just create here a string posts. Now let's create a method find all that will return a observable of post model array. We also need to decorate this method with a get decorator. And this get decorator will say whenever a request is sent to our server to the posts resource that has type of that the type of the request is get, this method will be fired. Now we need to access the PostService inside our PostController. In order to do this, thanks to NestJs, we have dependency injection, and the dependency injection is working the same way as in Angular, at least on the top level. We just provide it in our constructor. We will create a private PostService, and we provide a PostService class inside here. Now NestJs will know that we require a PostService inside this controller, and now we can access it very easily from inside our method, and we will return the findAll method. Very nice. Good. Now we have created our model, our service in our controller. Now we need to connect everything inside our block module. We will provide a post service, and we will provide a PostController inside here, and basically this is all we need inside this block module. Now back to the app module, and let's just import the post module. And by the way, we need to change the name as well for the module. Or we can actually leave it blog, because blog is the overall naming, and we operate with its different parts like posts. We can also have categories, which will be also part of the blog. So we leave blog module, but we have renamed PostController, and yeah, here in the app module we import the the block module. Good. Now let's check the application. We just do npm run. Oh, well, I think we can do npm start. Yeah, let's check package JSON. Yeah, we can do npm start. All right, the server started. Our application is hosted on our development server. We can see that the routes were resolved, and we have the PostController route now. Now let's go to our localhost 3000, remember, and we call the endpoint posts. As you can see, we have received our data from the API here, and one explanation: when we go to PostController, this string here is reflected here in the URL. Good. Let's actually integrate the API inside our Angular application. We will open our Angular application from last time. By the way, I will commit and push this code to GitHub, and the links will be provided under this video. And I will also add the links to the previous video as well. So now we go to our post resource, and we will describe the post resource. It will reflect our API. The post resource is actually only for communicating with the API. First of all, let's describe the data that the post resource will fetch from the API. We'll create a TypeScript file. Actually, let's just create a folder called data model. And here we can store the descriptions of our data. Let's create a post yeah, let's just call it post, general post. Let's call it general, or post list item. I will explain why I'll call them like that a little bit later. Post list item. And we will create just an interface that will describe the data itself. So as we already know, the post list item will have a title, which is of type string, a subtitle, a image URL, and a content. Good. This is just the description of our data that we will get from the API. All right, now we can start and code our API integration. First of all, we need to provide a URL. Let us just create a configuration file. Maybe let's just create it here, or we can create a common folder. No, let's not overcomplicate things. Let's just create here API config. And it will be a simple const called API config. And here we will have a property host. No, let's just create a URL, which will have the URL to our localhost with port 3000. Good. Let's go back to our post resource, and here we can say private read only, because we don't want the value to be changed, URL, and we say get the API config.url plus, as we already described that we will work with posts, we concatenate the name of the resource or the route of the REST API, and yeah, that's basically the URL. Now we will need the HTTP client from Angular in order to make HTTP requests. We also need to import in block module the HTTP client module in order to use the HTTP client service. I'm sorry. Let's go back. And we will reflect the same method as we have in our API, find all, which will return the same thing, a observable of post list items array. And here we call the HTTP client.get. We provide this URL, and this is it. This is all what we need in the post resource. Now we will reflect almost the same thing in the post service, because as I already mentioned, the post service is our so-called service layer. The post service will be injected in our components whenever we need to fetch some data. We don't want to fetch the data from the post resource directly. For that, we will use the post service. This is done because sometimes you want to add some business logic inside your service, and this business logic should be separated from just the resource call to the API. In more complicated projects, you will see how this provides you benefits, because you separate things like requests and calls in a resource, and business logic is provided inside the service layer. Anyway, it's more talking. Let's just begin with the coding. So we say public get all. Now we can actually name the method as we want. Get all post items, let's say. And it also will return a observable of post list item array, and it will return, and here is the part that we need where we require the post resource, and we return this post resource find all. Now let me show you an example why the service layer is a good way to work with your API. Let's say, for example, we get a task where it says that please change the order of the returned data. If you would have just a single class that fetches the data and modifies the data, you would write all inside this class. But as we do have just the post service, we can create, we can call, for example, the pipe method, and we can either filter the data or map the data or do whatever we want with the data only inside this method and only inside the service. And if someone is relying on the post resource, maybe we have another service, for example, category service, that also works with post resource. We don't need to repeat the same code that fetches the data because we already will have it inside our resource. Very well, let's just finish up this part and let's integrate the data inside our component. Also, let me check if we have declared the services inside our module. Yes, we have the post service and the post resource provided. Very well. Let's go to the list, post list module. Post list component. I'm sorry. Let's remove the test data and let's remove the this assignment. Now we will say that we need a post service, which is of type post service. And now on init, by the way, let's provide a type for this variable. We will say this is a observable of type post list item array. And now we can say that this post list service equals to this post service get all post items. Now let's start the application, the Angular application. We'll call ngserve, and let's go to the local host, and we'll open the console to see if there are any errors. Give him some time. It's building the application, needs some time. All right, we have now a error here. It says that in the post resource TS file on line 15, there is an error. Let's check the post resource and see what the error actually is. Observable is not assignable to type observable post list item. Okay, this might be because the get is returning a observable object for the type is observable object. We can actually try and override this by saying that this is the observable of type post list item array. This should actually eliminate the error. Let's check. Yeah, as you can see, the error is gone. All right, let's go to our application and see what errors we do have. Okay, we see that there is an error in the console, cannot find a defer supporting object of type object. ngFor only supports binding to iterables such as arrays. Well, this is actually expected because we have changed the type inside the post list component. The post list field was of type array, and now it's of type observable, and we have some data inside this observable. In order to work with observables inside our template, we just need to use a pipe. When I'm doing a pipe called async. Now Angular will know that we are working with a observable inside the template, and it should take care of our data. And now you can see we have a new error. It's a coarse error because our backend application and our frontend application are running on different ports. We can easily fix it by going to our Post API application. We will open main app, and now we can say app.enable coarse. We have to restart our application, and the error should be fixed. Finally, the example worked. If we take a look at the network tab, we see we have a post request to our endpoint. We have a request method get that requests the data from our API, and we successfully rendering the data on our Angular application. Now we have successfully completed this part of our video tutorial series, and in the next part we will be working a little bit more on the API. We will connect it to the database. We will use Postgres as our database, and we will fine-tune our Angular application to make it more interesting. Thank you for watching. It was Ruben from Codeforges.